had been hiking solo for 3 days through national forest land, somewhere between the border of Washington and Idaho. It was remote country, no towns for miles, no marked trails, and barely any signal even at higher elevation. I had a basic topographic map, a compass, and enough food and gear for a week. I wasn't worried about getting lost. I'd done trips like this before. The third day started clear, cool. I broke camp early, boiled some instant coffee, and packed up while the ground was still wet with dew. Around mid-morning, clouds rolled in fast, thick ones, the kind that seemed to come out of nowhere in the mountains. I was near a ridgeline, so I pushed harder to get over it before the weather turned worse. By noon, wind picked up. It got cold, fast. Then the rain started. First it was light, misty, almost refreshing. Then it just turned into sheets of water. Horizontal. Heavy gusts blew needles and small branches down from the trees. I couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead. My jacket soaked through in minutes. Everything in my pack started feeling heavier. I knew I couldn't stay out in that storm. Exposure can kill faster than most people think. I kept my eyes peeled for anything. Rock outcrops, thick pine cover, anything that might give me shelter. Then I spotted it. Off the trail a little, maybe 30 yards through some thick growth, an old cabin. I almost didn't believe it. The way it was tucked in, you'd never notice it unless you were right up on it. Just a squat, one-room structure with a slanted roof, dark wood weathered to gray. A tiny porch with 2 steps, no railing. No smoke from the chimney, but it looked dry and solid. I didn't care whose it was. I wasn't about to die trying to be polite. Inside, it was dark but warmer. There were no windows, just the door and a chimney in the corner. The smell hit first. Damp wood, old smoke, and dust. But it was dry. That was enough. There was a single cot made of wood and canvas in the corner. A stack of dry firewood beside an old iron stove. A small table, 1 chair. A few shelves with rusty cans, some wax candles, even a tin mug and a dull knife. I closed the door and lit a candle I found on the table. That's when I saw the journal. It was sitting under the candle, a weathered leather cover with a dry spine. Nothing fancy, just a notebook really full of short entries. Some were recent, one from just a couple months ago. A lot of them were hikers like me. Some just wrote dates and said thanks. Some mentioned bad weather. A few described the place, found it by accident, lifesaver during a storm, grateful for the roof. But one entry caught my eye. It was scrawled in shaky handwriting, barely legible, near the back. No date, just one sentence. If you find this place, leave before sundown. That sat with me. I read it again. If you find this place, leave before sundown. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. I tried to shake it off. Maybe someone was just trying to be spooky. Or maybe they had a bad experience, bear maybe, or a trespasser. Could have been anything. But the light outside was already fading. I stepped out for a second and looked up. Dark clouds had swallowed everything. No sun left to track. Just a dim gray haze. The rain hadn't let up. I was soaked, freezing, and exhausted. I stayed. I built a small fire in the stove. Some of the wood inside was damp, but it caught eventually. The iron stove gave off a dry, clunky heat. I pulled off my wet socks and boots and sat on the cot with the blanket that had been folded at the foot. It smelled musty, but it was warm. I boiled a bit of water for my freeze-dried food and ate in silence. The cabin creaked in the wind, but it felt solid. Safe almost, until midnight. I had just started to drift off when I sat bolt upright. 5 knocks, loud, deliberate, spaced out like someone wanted to make sure I heard them. Then silence. No footsteps, no voice, no more sound, just those 5 knocks. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there in the dark, heart pounding. I hadn't locked the door. It didn't even have a real lock, just a wooden latch. My flashlight was on the table. I grabbed it slowly and pointed it at the door. Nothing. The room was dead quiet, except the wind faintly whistling through gaps in the boards. I waited. Eventually, I dozed off again. Not real sleep, the kind where your body gives out, but your brain doesn't stop spinning. At dawn, I opened the door. The storm had passed. Everything was soaked. The trail was now just a muddy path, and the air smelled like wet pine and earth. I stepped out, looking for tracks, prints, anything. The ground was soft. My own boots had sunk in a little the day before, but there was nothing. No marks near the steps. No signs of movement around the cabin. No disturbance on the trail. It was as if no one had been there. I walked in a slow circle around the cabin. Nothing, just trees and wet brush. I left that morning. Didn't eat, didn't repack right. Just shoved everything into my pack, put my wet boots back on, and hiked fast until I found a fire road by late afternoon. I flagged down a passing ranger truck. The guy inside looked at me like I was half crazy, dripping wet and covered in mud. When I told him about the cabin, I expected him to nod, maybe tell me I wasn't supposed to be in there. But instead, he looked confused. "There's no shelter out there," he said. "Not for miles. That section's all unmanaged forest. Closest ranger cabin's way up north." I told him exactly where I found it, gave coordinates off my map. He shook his head, said he'd been through that area plenty of times. Never saw anything like I described. I didn't argue. A few weeks later, I went back. I had to. I couldn't get it out of my head. The 5 knocks, the journal, the warmth of that stove. It had felt so real. I knew I had to go see it again. This time I hiked in from a different angle using GPS and landmarks I remembered. Took a full day. When I reached the spot, nothing. Just a small clearing surrounded by trees. No cabin, no chimney, no steps, no firewood, not even a patch of flattened grass. It was like it had never existed, like I had imagined the whole thing. But I still had the journal. It was in my pack, tucked into a Ziploc bag with my maps. I flipped through it again when I got home. The writing was still there. The names, the entries, that same shaky line on the last page. Asterisk if you find this place. Leave before sundown. Asterisk. I kept the journal for a while. I showed it to one friend. He thought I was messing with him. Said it looked like I wrote it myself. I don't know anymore. I don't have answers. I don't believe in ghosts or stories. But I know what I felt. I know I was there. I know what I heard. And I know one thing for sure. If I ever see that place again, I won't stay. I rented the off-grid cabin in Idaho because I needed to be alone for a while. It was deep in the woods, 10 miles from the closest road. No phone signal, no internet, no neighbors for miles. Just a small one-room cabin with solar panels, a propane stove, and a composting toilet out back. It sounded perfect. I wanted to disconnect, breathe fresh air, chop some firewood, and try to reset my head a bit. The first 2 days were peaceful, cold but manageable. I kept the fire going in the wood stove and used the propane for cooking. There was a small library of books on a shelf, and I picked one out the first night. I spent most of the days chopping wood and walking the nearby trails. It was quiet. No cars, no people, just wind through the trees and the occasional crunch of snow under my boots. On the 3rd day, I got up early and spent the morning chopping a fresh stack of wood behind the cabin. The air was sharp and clean. My arms were sore, and my breath fogged with every swing. I came back in just before noon, sweaty under my coat, and ready to warm up and eat. As soon as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The book I'd left on the small table was open, but not to the page I was on. I remember clearly where I stopped, because I had folded the top corner of the page the night before. But now it was lying flat, open to a chapter one hadn't even reached yet. That stopped me in my tracks. I glanced over toward the fireplace. My boots, still damp from the snow, had been near the front door when I left. Now they were neatly placed on the rug near the fire, like someone had moved them to help them dry. And then I saw the towel. It was hanging on the wall hook near the propane heater. Plain white bath towel. Damp. I hadn't used a towel since arriving. I'd been washing my face with snow and hadn't even touched the shower yet. But the towel looked freshly used. Creased, darker in color, hanging loosely like it had just been put back. I stood there for a while, heart thumping. I checked every inch of the cabin, under the bed, inside the cabinets, even opened the hatch to the small crawl space. Nothing. The place was exactly how I left it, except for those small, strange details. I told myself I might have moved the boots without thinking. Maybe I opened the book to look something up and forgot. Maybe the towel had gotten damp from the steam near the propane heater. I was alone in the woods and starting to get in my own head. I tried not to overthink it. I made lunch, read a few pages of the book again, and tried to relax. That night, though, I didn't feel right. I locked the door, solid deadbolt, and slid the small table in front of it. I didn't have any sort of alarm, so I took a cooking pot from the cupboard, filled it with loose change from my backpack, and set it right in front of the door. If anyone opened it, the pot would tip over and the coins would scatter. I figured the noise would wake me up. I went to bed with a flashlight next to me. The fire crackled. The wind howled softly outside. I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the cabin made me hold my breath. At 2:18 a.m., I remember because I looked at my watch. I woke up to the sound of coins clinking. It wasn't loud, just a light metallic rattle. A soft clink like someone was shifting the pot gently, trying not to make noise. I lay still. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even roll over, just stared at the darkness. The door never opened. I didn't hear the sound of hinges or footsteps, just that soft metal rattle. And then silence. I stayed awake until the faint gray of morning started to push through the small window. When I finally got up, the first thing I looked at was the door, still locked. The table was pushed aside slightly, just enough that it wasn't flush against the frame like I left it. And the pot? It was across the room on its side. Coins scattered everywhere. It hadn't fallen or rolled there. It had been moved, placed, set down, then tipped over. I walked over slowly and picked up a coin. My fingers were shaking. I turned toward the hook near the heater. The towel, still wet. No one could have gotten in without a key. The windows were all latched from the inside, and none were broken. The only other door was the back one leading to the outhouse, and I had a piece of twine looped through that one at night so I'd know if it opened. It was still tied, untouched. Someone had been inside, not just once. Maybe they were still coming in while I left to chop wood. Maybe they had a copy of the key. Maybe they lived nearby, deep in the woods, watching. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't even pack properly. I stuffed my gear into my bag, grabbed my coat, and left. I hiked all 10 miles through the snow with barely a stop. My legs were burning, and my hands went numb at one point, but I didn't care. I didn't feel safe until I reached the main road and flagged down a passing truck. Later, after warming up and getting signal again, I called the rental owner. I didn't say much, just that something felt off and I was leaving early. They didn't ask questions, just said okay and hung up. A week later, I was back home. I kept thinking about that towel, about how carefully the coins had been moved without waking me, about how whoever it was never needed to break anything. They had time. They had access. I didn't report it. What could I say? There was no damage, nothing stolen. Just the feeling that someone had been there, right there while I was sleeping, moving through the small space like they belonged there more than I did. I don't think it was a one-time thing. I think whoever it was had done this before, and probably would again, but I'll never go back to find out. I rented the cabin in northern Georgia because I needed quiet. Real quiet. The kind you don't get in cities or even suburbs. Just space, trees, and time to think. I had a week off work and planned to spend it reading, hiking, and maybe getting started on a few personal writing projects I'd been putting off. The listing had described the place as rustic but charming, which was code for old. But I didn't mind that. I actually prefer places with a bit of wear. Scratched wooden floors, dusty corners, real doors that creak when they shut. The kind of place that's had people in it, not just drywall and silence. The cabin sat near the edge of a forested slope, about an hour from the nearest town. The drive-in was steep and winding, but once I arrived, it was peaceful. Pine trees on all sides, a small gravel drive, no cell reception, no nearby cabins, just the way I wanted it. Inside, the place had everything I needed. A little kitchen, an old cast iron stove, a clawfoot tub in the bathroom, and a queen bed tucked into a small bedroom at the back. Next to the front door on a narrow table was a guest book. One of those spiral-bound notebooks where visitors leave notes for the next guest. I flipped through it casually the first night. Most entries were short. Had a great weekend. Thanks for the quiet escape. Saw a bear on the trail. Bring spray. The kind of cheesy, harmless stuff you'd expect. But maybe 10 or 12 pages in one note stood out. It wasn't signed. It was dated just a few weeks earlier. The handwriting was rough, almost rushed. And it only said, "Do not open the trapdoor, even if you hear them." I didn't take it seriously at first. I thought maybe someone had tried to leave a creepy joke. I laughed under my breath, closed the notebook, and forgot about it. But then that night I noticed it. In the bedroom closet, tucked beneath some old winter coats and a rolled-up rug, was a square wooden hatch in the floor, about 2 feet by 2 feet. There was a thick iron padlock on it, bolted through a metal latch. It was old but solid. I knelt and pulled on it just out of curiosity, but it didn't budge. There wasn't any draft coming from underneath, and no strange smells. Just a cold, dusty square of wood with a lock on it. I figured it must be some kind of root cellar or crawlspace access. Maybe the plumbing or septic stuff ran through under there. Still, the timing of the note and the hatch was strange. But I brushed it off. Rural cabins always have weird little quirks. The first night passed without anything strange. I slept well, woke up to morning light coming through the slats in the blinds, made myself coffee, and went for a long walk in the woods behind the cabin. The silence in those forests is different, presses in from all sides. You hear everything. A squirrel's claws on bark, wind in dead leaves, branches creaking far above. But no cars, no voices, no planes, just the world as it is. That night, though, things changed. I was lying in bed, half asleep, maybe around midnight, when I heard a dull thud. Just one. Then a pause. Then another. It was faint, but it came from below, from under the floor. My first thought was pipes. Old places have noisy plumbing. Then I remembered the trapdoor. The sound didn't repeat for a while, so I stayed in bed, listening. 15 minutes later, I heard it again. This time more like a dragging sound, slow and heavy, like something being pulled across a dirt floor. I got up, walked into the closet, and stood over the hatch. I knelt down, pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. Back in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling. The sounds came again, soft thumps, something brushing against wood. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard something else. Muffled, human sounding. Not clear, but definitely something like a voice. Not talking, more like crying, soft, choked, and low. It lasted less than a minute, then stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I tried to explain it to myself. Animals, maybe raccoons under the cabin. Some kind of echo, old boards shifting. I walked the perimeter of the cabin, looking for any crawlspace opening or vent. Nothing. The base was solid stone and wood, no gaps. The only access below was that trapdoor. Around noon, I called the owner using the landline in the kitchen. He picked up quickly. I explained that I'd heard noises under the floor, like something moving, maybe someone. There was a pause. Then he said, calmly, "Ignore it. You'll be fine as long as the trapdoor stays shut." That was it. No apology, no confusion. Just that one line like he'd said it before. The line went dead. I didn't bother calling back. That afternoon, I tried to distract myself. I read, cooked, sat on the porch with a blanket, watching the sun go down over the trees. But my eyes kept drifting back to the bedroom, to the closet. That night, it got worse. The noises started earlier, just past 10. Louder this time, repetitive scraping like nails on old wood. Then sudden bangs, as if something slammed into the underside of the trapdoor. I stood in the hallway, frozen, heart racing. My brain told me to stay away from it, not to go near it, but I couldn't help myself. I opened the closet door, flipped on the light, and stared down. The hatch was trembling, not violently, just a faint, vibrating shake. And then, from underneath came the voice again, clearer this time. It wasn't crying. It was whispering, low, panicked, just one word repeated over and over. "Please." I backed away slowly, shut the closet door, locked the bedroom door even though it didn't matter. I sat in the kitchen with every light on, fully dressed, backpack half-packed, shoes on. I knew I wasn't staying another night. The question wasn't if I'd leave, it was whether I could wait until daylight. Around 3 a.m. I heard something else. Not from below, from outside. Heavy footsteps circling the cabin. Slow and deliberate. The floor creaked beneath me as I stood to listen. I went to the window and peeked through the curtain. I couldn't see anything, but the steps continued, crunching gravel, brushing against dry leaves, moving from one side of the cabin to the next. I didn't move, just sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the front door. By morning, everything was quiet again. No more sounds, no more footsteps, just birdsong as if none of it had happened. I didn't shower, didn't eat. I grabbed my bag and left everything else behind. I locked the front door out of habit, though it felt pointless. As I got in the car and drove down that winding mountain road, I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see someone following. I never went back, never contacted the owner again, didn't leave a note in the guest book. For a long time, I tried to forget it, but I never really could. The thing that haunts me most isn't the whisper, or the shaking trapdoor, or the footsteps outside. It's the not knowing. I still don't know what was under there, whether it was a person or several, someone trapped, or someone hiding. I don't know if they were begging to be let out, or warning me to keep it closed, but someone put a lock on that hatch, and someone else wrote that note in the guest book. Whatever's under that floor, it wasn't meant to be found. My friend Ethan and I had been planning the hunting trip for months. We both needed a break from work, and Colorado in late October felt like the right kind of remote. We found the cabin on a small listing site, not one of the big rental platforms. It was basic and cheap, but the pictures showed a quiet spot deep in the woods with lots of tree cover and a long gravel road leading up to it. The host, a man named Carl, told us over the phone that there were 2 identical cabins on the property, but only one was available. The other, he said, had some structural issues and was sealed up for repairs. He made it sound like it wasn't a big deal, just some foundation cracks and broken plumbing. He said nobody had been inside for years. The drive up from Denver took us 5 hours. The last hour was all winding dirt roads through dense forest, the kind where even your cell signal gives up. When we finally pulled up, I saw both cabins sitting across from each other with maybe 70 or 80 feet between them. Ours was clean and simple, a dark brown exterior with a small porch, 2 chairs, and a rusted grill. The other cabin looked nearly the same shape, same color, but something about it felt heavier. Its front door had a thick, weathered chain wrapped across it, and every window was dark and dusty. I could tell the glass hadn't been cleaned in a long time. Inside our cabin, everything worked fine. Old furniture, a basic kitchen, 1 bedroom downstairs, and a loft with another bed up top. There was a small fireplace and a stack of dry logs. No TV, no Wi-Fi, no distractions. That first night, we cooked some venison sausage and played cards. The woods outside were dead quiet. No wind, no animals, just the occasional groan of old trees shifting in the cold. The place felt like it had been frozen in time. It was just after 11 p.m. when Ethan looked out the window and stopped mid-sentence. He motioned for me to come over. Across the clearing, through the dirty window of the sealed cabin, we saw a light flick on. Just one. A soft yellow glow behind the front window. We both stared for a while, confused. I thought maybe there was a timer or motion light inside, but that didn't make much sense. The windows were coated in grime. The place looked completely abandoned. Still, the light stayed on for maybe 10 minutes before going dark again. The next morning, after breakfast, we decided to check it out. Snow had fallen overnight, just a thin layer, and we walked across the clearing, boots crunching in the cold. The The cabin looked even worse up close. The front door had a thick chain with a padlock, rusty but solid. We tried tugging on it, but it didn't budge. The windows were dusty and streaked. I cupped my hands around my eyes and tried to peer inside. Couldn't see much, just outlines of furniture, maybe a table or a couch. But it all looked untouched. No footprints in the snow around the porch except ours. No signs that anyone had been inside. We walked around the perimeter, checked every window. Same thing, closed, dirty, no light fixtures near the windows. It just didn't add up. That night, around the same time, just before midnight, the light came on again. This time we were ready for it. We turned off all our lights inside, sat in the dark, and watched from the window. Same soft glow behind the front window. But this time we saw movement. A shadow pacing slowly behind the curtains, back and forth, not rushed, like someone walking from one wall to the other and turning again. Ethan whispered, "Are you seeing this?" But I didn't answer. I couldn't stop staring. I was trying to make sense of it. If the place was locked, and no one had been in there, what the hell were we looking at? The light stayed on longer this time, maybe 20 minutes, before shutting off suddenly. No fade, just gone. The movement stopped at the same time. We both stood there for a while, then double-checked that our doors were locked. I tried to write it off as some old electrical thing, maybe an automatic light tied to a bad circuit, but I knew I was just grasping. There's no way we were both imagining the movement. On the third night, we didn't even pretend to sleep. We sat with binoculars by the window, wrapped in blankets, hot coffee in a thermos between us. I kept watching the snow. I'd walked around both cabins earlier that day and knew the snow around the other cabin was undisturbed. If someone was going in there, we'd see their prints. We had to. The light came on again at 1:30 a.m. sharp. Same window, same yellow glow. I lifted the binoculars and froze. The pacing had started again. The movement was smooth, steady, a shape going from one end of the room to the other. No jerky motions, no rush. Just someone walking like they were thinking about something. Ethan whispered that he could see it too. And then, just like that, the front door of the other cabin slowly swung open. The chain was still wrapped across it, but the door itself moved, creaking open into the cold. We both stared, not blinking, not breathing. I expected to see someone step out, but no one did. The door stayed open, swinging just slightly with the wind. The light stayed on. Nothing moved anymore. We didn't sleep. We kept watch until the sun came up, too scared to even speak. When daylight came, we went out. I was half expecting to see boot prints or some sign that someone had walked around. But there was nothing. The snow around the cabin was completely untouched. The chain on the door was still locked in place. The door was shut again, like it had never moved. No signs of entry, no broken lock. I even checked the hinges. Everything was the same as the day before. We packed our bags and left without finishing breakfast. We didn't talk much on the drive down the mountain, just listened to the tires crunching gravel and the occasional thump of snow falling off branches. I didn't feel right until we hit paved road again. Cell signal came back halfway to Denver, and the first thing I did was look up the property. It took some digging, but I found an article from 2004 in a small local newspaper archive. The property had been owned by a couple in their late 30s, Ron and Stacy Baines. They lived there full-time and rented out one of the cabins to hunters and hikers. In October of that year, a neighbor reported gunshots. When police arrived, they found the couple in the cabin that's now sealed. Both had been shot once in the head, execution style. Nothing stolen, no forced entry, no witnesses. The case was never solved. After that, the surviving family sold the property. The cabins sat empty for a few years before someone started renting one of them again. I didn't tell Ethan right away. I didn't know what to say. The pacing, the light, the open door. I've tried to come up with explanations, wiring issues, animals, tricks of light, but none of them sit right. Not when I remember how deliberate the pacing was. Not when I remember the clean snow, untouched, like nobody had been there at all. We never went back. Every fall, when the air turns cold and the trees start to thin out, I think about that weekend. I think about that light coming on at the same time, the same slow movements, and I wonder if it still happens, if someone else is sitting in that cabin across the clearing, watching a light come on where nobody is supposed to be. I rented a small cabin up in the Montana mountains, late October. I needed a place away from everything to finish a novel I had been stuck on for months. City noise, emails, texts, they were all pulling me away. This cabin was listed as quiet, off-grid, no distractions. That's exactly what I wanted. The drive up took me through thick woods and winding gravel roads. It was colder than I expected. Frost clung to the trees even in the afternoon. By the time I arrived, the sky was already gray and low. The cabin sat alone on a small clearing, just big enough for a car to park and a path to circle around the structure. It was a one-bedroom, simple layout, with stove, a little kitchen, small desk by the front window, bedroom in the back. I liked how empty it felt. First night was uneventful. I lit a fire, unpacked my bags, and skimmed some old notes for the book. I didn't get much writing done. I was tired from the drive, and honestly, the silence hit me harder than I thought it would. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own blood pulsing in your ears. No traffic, no wind, no animals. Just stillness. The next morning, I woke early. I always do in unfamiliar places. There was frost on the inside corners of the window glass, and the light coming through looked dull and pale. As I stood in the bedroom stretching, I noticed something odd. The window facing the edge of the woods had a crack in it. A starburst right in the middle, like something had hit it dead on. It wasn't shattered, just a clean burst of cracks. No broken glass. I was sure I hadn't seen it the night before. I had looked out that window while brushing my teeth. But maybe I'd missed it. I told myself it could have been a change in temperature, or maybe a bird had hit it earlier. Still, the glass didn't seem chipped from outside, just fractured from the center. I ran my hand over it. It was smooth. I thought about calling the property manager, but it didn't feel like a big deal. I taped a sticky note to remind myself and tried to move on. Spent the rest of the day writing, made decent progress. The wind picked up that evening, and the temperature dropped fast. I brought in more wood and locked the front door before heading to bed around 10. At 2 in the morning, I woke up suddenly. No dreams, no reason. Just that sharp kind of alertness that slaps you out of sleep. The room was cold, but it wasn't that. I listened. Nothing at first. Then I heard it, soft tapping. I sat up slowly, still under the blanket. It was coming from the cracked bedroom window. Not banging, not scratching, just tapping. Light, delicate, like someone was using a single finger, pressing it gently, rhythmically against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. My mouth went dry. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the window from the bed. My heart was pounding hard, and I tried to convince myself it was a branch or maybe frost popping from the glass. But it wasn't random. It was slow and even almost like a metronome. I stayed frozen for maybe 20 minutes. The tapping stopped after a while. I'm not even sure when. Eventually, I must have fallen back asleep because I woke up to the light coming in again, and I was still in the same position. First thing I did was grab my boots and coat and go outside to the side of the cabin. The frost had hardened the ground overnight, so every step crunched under my feet. I walked around to the window and stopped. There were boot prints in the frozen dirt. One set. They were directly under the bedroom window, facing it. They weren't mine. I had only walked around the cabin once when I got there, and I came from the other direction. These were fresh. You could see the deep edges, the pattern of the sole. They hadn't been walked over or disturbed. And the part that made my stomach turn, there was no trail leading to them. The prints started about 3 feet from the glass, like whoever had been standing there had just appeared. No approach from the woods. No return path. Just standing, then gone. I looked around for more prints, trying not to panic. The ground was mostly hard, but I checked near the trees, the edge of the clearing, even behind the cabin. Nothing, just those few prints under the window. I went back inside and locked the door again, even though it had been locked all night. I sat at the table by the stove, staring at the fire as it burned down, trying to think it through. Maybe it was a hunter passing through. Maybe they saw the cabin and came to check it out. But why stand at the window tapping like that? And why leave no trail? The cabin had no neighbors. I had no cell signal. The listing said the nearest house was 4 miles downhill. I spent the rest of the morning packing. Every few minutes, I'd look at the window, half expecting to hear the tapping again. It never came. I couldn't bring myself to sleep there another night. As I was about to leave, I walked to the window one last time. I stared at that spiderweb crack. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the shape, it looked too centered, too perfect. Like it had been made on purpose. I drove away just after noon. Never looked back in the rearview mirror. I didn't finish the book. Couldn't. Every time I sat down to write, my mind drifted back to that window, that cold tapping in the dark. I kept imagining someone out there, watching, waiting. I tried to explain it to a friend once, but saying it out loud made it sound ridiculous. But the part that won't leave me alone, even now, isn't the tapping or the cracked glass. It's the boot prints, because they started in the middle of nowhere, like someone had been placed there, planted, like they didn't walk to that spot at all. They were just there, and somehow, they knew exactly where to stand.